troubled project, and how do you get such an assignment?
Well, I'm not managing only troubled projects. I'm just a normal project manager that every once in a while gets a troubled project as an assignment. And first to understand what a troubled project is, there are of course several definitions for troubled project, and this makes sense because there is more than one way to define what project success is. But I'm not going to bore you to that with all the technical details. Let's just say a troubled project is, in simple words, one that is in a really bad shape.
Mm-hmm.
So this can mean anything from a project that is completely out of control to a project that for which the objectives achievement doesn't look very likely anymore. So this means the scope is constantly moving. You have a very dissatisfied sponsor that doesn't trust or have faith that the project will succeed. You have constantly overrun budget, several missed deadlines, and so on. So you can have any of these factors put together, any combination of that.
Mm-hmm.
Now, the recovery of such a project is, before anything, what isn't is not applying some magic to push the project through to success. I would say this is rather a project in itself.
Mm-hmm.
Its aim is to identify those parts of the project that can still be saved and put them on track. This means you have to analyze all the symptoms. You have to identify the root causes. You have to get management endorsement for the solutions that you propose, and then just apply them. So this would be it in a nutshell. In the beginning, you just plunge in the middle of chaos, in the middle of a dysfunctional team with team members that constantly fight, that blame each other, that are very frustrated and disoriented, and this all happens for good reasons too. What you do at that point, you have to manage some sort of a crisis in the beginning, and above that, you have to request also difficult decisions or unpopular decisions. You have to state unpopular truths, and sometimes in extreme cases it can lead also to replacing some of the toxic, let's say, team members. And this is why you need a very strong management support, and ideally the person that does this should come from outside the project borders without the political baggage, that a person that can just jump in, analyze, state the truth, do the job, and then step out. This is ideally, but in reality it doesn't really happen like that. Usually the project manager stays and continues running the project on a new setup. Just so that we don't misunderstand each other, this is not a witch hunt. So it's not that the purpose is not to identify a scapegoat or the team members that somehow contributed to bringing the project in this state. It's usually there is no one responsible person for this. It's a cumulus of factors, and the purpose is to identify those factors and remove them. Bad things can happen, and it's the project, and the project team is like a machine. If you don't tune it right, it will not properly do what it's supposed to do. So that's pretty much what project recovery is about.
How long are you taking care of recovering troubled projects?
The duration, depending on the complexity, it can take from a couple of weeks to even months.
Mm-hmm.
As I said, it depends on the complexity, it depends on the state which you find the project, and also it depends on the type of management support. The more management support you get, the faster it goes, and usually this is a very intense and stressful period, not only for the project manager but also for the team, and you want to keep this duration as short as possible if you want the project to eventually succeed. What is also important to state from the very beginning is that it will get worse before it gets better. So there would be some tough decisions, as I mentioned, that need to be taken, some truths that have to be accepted, such as existence of sunk costs, that some decisions that have been taken throughout the project life have been wrong, that maybe the, I don't know, stuffing is incorrect and so on and so forth. So it depends on the symptoms and the root causes that stay behind them.
Are there some usual symptoms of a troubled project or a project that is getting into troubles?
There is a very generous range of symptoms that you can find in a troubled project. It would be very difficult to put them in a list like with bullet points. And even if I did that, finding those symptoms in your project doesn't mean necessarily that your project is troubled. Of course, the more you have, the more likely it is that you have a troubled project on your hands. But they can appear. So the project is moving. It has a life of its own. Yeah? So the management tools have to also be adapted throughout the life of the project. So if you get some of these symptoms throughout the project implementation, don't panic. You just have to be aware of that and immediately act. The sooner you act, the less likely it is that you're going to end up with a troubled project.
And then who is like the person who assigns you or decides that, yes, this is a troubled project?
Well, it's the sponsor that raises a flag and says, okay, this is not working, we have to do something about it. But the assignment is, of course, coming from the line manager. So if you raise also your flag and you say, I need a challenge, then this will definitely be one. So these are all symptoms that you have to have the patience to identify. You have several means for that. You have interviews, you have analyzing the existing documentation and cross-checking with what you get out of the interviews with the stakeholders. You have shadowing, you have just attending meetings and observing how the team works together. So, you end up with symptoms like, as I mentioned, dysfunctional teams. You see people that are demotivated and maybe are afraid to speak up, or they don't care anymore and they don't speak up. You can have again, among the common symptoms, you can have a lot of change requests in a project. You can have decisions that linger or decisions that get changed often. These are the most obvious ones, but there are also more subtle ones. That's why I said you have to have the patience and dig through the project and not just analyze the documentation and say, okay, this, and this needs to be done. Behind this, you have to also have the patience and to have general understanding of project management to identify the root causes. And these can also vary. It's also a very broad range of root causes. Of course, they all go down to the basics of project management, but the most common would be, I guess, poor communication or unstructured communication, incorrect governance, incorrect or insufficient staffing, wrong management expectations, and unrealistic management expectations. There are several. And as I mentioned, some of these or most of these can be solved if you have proper management support.
So what are the most important prerequisites for a project recovery? Are there any required skills that you need to have?
So there are two parts of this question, the prerequisites and the skills. When we're talking about prerequisites, I would say the most important, as I also mentioned it before, is the management support. Without that, you can't do much. Of course, some things you can improve, but as long as the management doesn't accept that there is an issue and doesn't support you in taking those decisions and implementing those solutions that sometimes may be harsh, then it's hard to make a change, to make a difference. So that would be the first prerequisite, I think, the management support. Another one, you want this person to be as much as possible independent, right? So that you don't have, so that he or she is not afraid to speak up and is not afraid to say this inconvenient truth. Yeah, that decision is wrong, or this setup is wrong, or this governance doesn't work out. We have to restructure it. So, as I mentioned before, the project manager for such a role would have to come out of these project borders without a political baggage. These, I would say, are the most important prerequisites. And when it comes to skills, I would say there is no magic. any project manager can do it. You have to have experience, of course, to know how to structure a project. You have to have the understanding why certain tools and techniques are better than others in certain situations. There is no one size fits all. So, and there are several ways you can solve an issue in project management. But some, in certain situations, are better than others. So I guess this would be the important skills. Yeah.
I was curious, can all troubled projects be recovered?
Unfortunately, no. One of the outcomes of such an exercise can be a recommendation to cancel the project. And this can be for several reasons, but maybe you just ran out of time. So whatever the project was supposed to deliver will come too late. So then it makes no sense to continue. But, this is not necessarily a bad thing. In the end, you have patched a leaking pipe, so you save some costs.